Welcome back to ESPL Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Paul Kelly. We are still in shock that Fury Usyk is definitely not happening now. That's the latest news that the fight is off for the time being. So this video is just about what's next for Tyson Fury, really. He's we're assuming he will fight on. We're assuming he's not going to retire again. So just going to discuss that. But yeah, first of all, Paul, how are you? How are you? Hope you're not still in shock.
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. Obviously disappointed, probably more the word shocked. I
Yeah,
think a lot of us didn't think the fight actually was going to happen, I suppose. But yeah, just very disappointed with how it's all played out.
yeah, it is. It is disappointing. Cool. I'm going to throw some names at you and see what you think of them. Tell me how likely you think that's going to happen, and yeah, that's kind of what I want. We're not talking about who kind of we want to see Tyson Fury fight next because that's a very different conversation. We're talking about how likely certain opponents are. First name kind of have to start with Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua fights next week against Jermaine Franklin. There's been talk from Eddie Hearn and others in the last 24 hours that if he wins on April the 1st, could he fight Tyson Fury next? Um, just let me know your thoughts on the possibility of Fury Joshua next.
Next to none, in my opinion. If I'm being brutally honest, I know Eddie did say about and I liked his plan on paper. His tweet saying, "Yeah, we'll have Wilder, Usyk, and have Fury, Joshua within the winners fight, unification, undisputed." I don't see it happening, to be honest. I do think Joshua wins against Franklin, but the likelihood of this happening next, I would not be surprised if they started to discuss it and say they were in talks again. But I just really don't. I don't think that's overly likely to happen. I think it all depends on how Joshua looks this weekend as well. I see for Joshua the Dylan White fight happening next, probably. To be quite honest,
Yeah, I
um,
think like you got to consider they've tried to make this fight in the past, and if you consider, right now, look, Fury's last fight sold 70,000 tickets against Derek Chisora. Joshua kind of isn't selling out the O2 against Jermaine Franklin. And I just so in terms of their stock is in quite different places at the moment, I would say. However, I'm kind of not giving up complete hope just yet. I feel like if Fury wants to be in a mega fight, then that's kind of the fight there. And yeah, you never know. And I feel like that we don't really know how close they were to making the fight for last December. But for whatever reason, the fight didn't happen, and yeah, we'll kind of all have to accept this fight may never happen. But we'll see. We'll see how Joshua gets on next week, and then see if there are any further developments. Next name on the list, Paul, is Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce, of course, fights April 15th against Zhilei Zhang. Expected to win that fight. He's the strong favourite. Both with Queensbury, unlike Joshua, of course. They've obviously kind of had that coming together at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in December. Um, yeah, thoughts on could we see Tyson Fury versus Joe Joyce next?
yeah, I think this one's far more likely, to be honest. Again, I don't think this will be the route they take. Just giving my honest opinion, but it makes far more. I think it makes sense from a business point of view, as you alluded to there, Elliot. Both Queensbury fighters, both promoted by Frank Warren. On paper, it is easy to make. Obviously Joyce has been calling for a world title shot. Now he's kind of beaten everyone. He's in a good ranking with almost every governing body as well. So I think that fight makes sense. I would like to see that fight. I'd like to see Joyce given a chance to fight for a world title. I think that would be a cracking fight. I think Fury would win it. But I think that would be a really good, strong matchup and would be a decent fight. But do I see that happening next for Tyson Fury? Still have my doubts.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of have to say that about every opponent now, don't you? Yeah, I think I agree with you. I would really like to see it. I think Joe Joyce deserves that world title shot now. He's done enough. I think another issue here is Joyce is fighting April 15th. When is he going to be happy to be back in the ring again against someone like Tyson Fury? I just think there's that timings issue there as well. I can imagine Fury comes out saying, right, I want the fight in June, and Joyce won't be ready for them. I want the fight in July, and that's still possibly that's going to be a no. So that's a problem that I have with that fight as well. I'm not convinced Fury would be willing to wait for as long as Joyce is until Joyce is kind of ready to get back in the ring. But we'll see. We'll see what happens on April 15th. Maybe it could be Tyson Fury versus Zhilei Zhang later in the year. Who knows? But not going to kind of go through all the top 10 of Bucks Red Bull because I've not got all afternoon. Final name that I'm just going to put to you, look, will this fight happen next? Probably not. But this is a fighter who is a top 10 heavyweight, former world champion, British fight fans are aware of, and hasn't fought, I think, since September, October. So you would think he is due to be in the ring soon. Andy Ruiz. There's been no rumors about Tyson Fury fighting Andy Ruiz, but it's just a name that kind of he is kind of a name, and you'd like to think is maybe a possibility. Thoughts on this one? For this one, tell me like your thoughts on whether you would want to see that fight as well.
Um, Again, I'm pretty sure didn't Andy Ruiz put something on social media saying that he was throwing his name in the hat fight Tyson Fury. Again, I haven't heard much on else on it, which can sometimes, as we know, be a good sign. There could be something going on in the background there. I know obviously Ruiz was meant to be. There was talks of him fighting Wilder, but that hasn't seemed to come to fruition. That might still well happen next, but in terms of that fight with Fury, yeah, I mean, if we're not getting the Usyk fight and the Joshua fight looks unlikely, we've gone over to Joshua and Joyce. I think yeah, Andy Ruiz. He's as you said, he's a top 10 heavyweight, former world champion. And I think it's a fight that Fury would look at and know that he probably wins quite convincingly. So, but as I agree, it is a name, it would sell in the UK.
Yeah,
Everyone knows who he is. So I could see that. I could see that being an opponent for Tyson Fury, possibly next. Yeah, depending on how whether Wilder Ruiz happens, because I saw Wilder as well saying it was time to get back into the gym,
yeah,
looking for his next fight. So it kind of depends on how all that plays out.
yeah. Going off topic slightly, obviously, I think kind of I think as you kind of mentioned, there's been discussion about possibly Wilder against Usyk next, which you got to think that's a possibility now, and Usyk would probably be willing to fight Wilder. So maybe if Wilder fights Usyk, maybe this Ruiz Fury fight could happen. One thing I'd add to that is I feel like if Fury versus Joshua doesn't happen next, if Fury versus Joyce doesn't happen next, obviously Fury versus Usyk doesn't happen next, then you got to think Fury kind of then I do think Ruiz becomes one of the options. I really do. I think Fury would kind of fancy that fight from a style point of view. But we shall see. I've got two questions left for you, Paul. First question is: are there any names that we haven't mentioned that you think Fury could fight next? Not necessarily names
Yep.
you want to see, but are there any names that kind of spring to your mind?
Here's one for you. A complete curveball, Elliot. Throwing this one right back to you. What about Francis Ngannou?
Um, yeah, like I wouldn't rule that one out. I've not heard anything recently on that one, to be honest with you. I don't follow MMA, UFC like yourself. But I think that fight could happen in the future because there would be a lot of money involved. I don't think it will happen next, personally, at this stage of Fury's career. I think it will happen in 2 or 3 years' time when Fury's kind of at the end. Personally, what do you
Yeah, I
think?
mean, yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. I don't think it'll happen next. The only other question I really have is Frank Warren supposedly has Wembley booked for April 29th. So do they just throw that in the bin completely? Or do you think there's a chance that Fury just fights any XYZ opponent on that date?
Good question. I don't think Fury's fighting on April the 29th because he's not really been. I don't think he's really been in camp. He's not been with his trainer Sugar Hill. Sugar Hill's been with the Coley in the States. Um, so yeah, I don't think Fury will fight that date. I think that nobody will be fighting at Wembley Stadium on April 29th. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll hear something in the next couple of days. You never know. We'll wrap things up then, Paul. Got a bit of a boring question to ask as the final one. Fury last fought in December against Chisora in not a very competitive fight. Um, when do you think? When do you think? What month do you think we'll see him back in the ring? When you expecting it for him to be back in action?
I think from Fury's perspective, he'll want to get in the ring as soon as possible. Obviously, we both don't think that 29th of April date is viable. May is probably even a wee bit close now as well. So I think probably June we might be looking at here for the return of Tyson Fury's next fight.
Yeah, I think so. I think that just kind of that being a proper summer month probably works if he's going to be fighting at Wembley Stadium. I think that was the thing about the April 29th date for me is it could still be horrible weather in London then, which doesn't suit the event that well. Doesn't mean it wouldn't go ahead, but yeah, it can still be a bit of a dodgy month, whereas June is more maybe more reliable. So we shall see. There's always kind of news coming out about Tyson Fury and what he says he's going to do next. So this is an ongoing topic. We'll see how much it changes in the next 24 hours or more so. Paul, thank you for joining me. Great to discuss this with you, and I will speak to you soon. Okay.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks.